With the unbanning of Zoodiac Drident and the unlimit of Barrage, we now have a perfect engine to go with our XYZ version of Lunalight. Barrage goes crazy in this deck. Let me show you what I mean. Starting with the main deck, I have 3 copies of Gold Leo. Gold Leo is the main starter of the deck, as it's just a 1-card combo on its own. However, it's pretty weak into cards like Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler, in that they negate the entire effect, so you can't use the recycle effect to add back your black sheep. And a lot of the time you can kinda be stuck with this on the field, even if you link this off into Almirage so you can bring it back with, for example, a Tiger. It doesn't really accomplish anything on its own. However, with the power of Zoodiac Barrage, we now have access to basically an emergency teleport for a Beast Warrior type monster. And then we can go into various rank 4s, such as a Dugaris to dig for engine, or set a Tenki to grab an extender. And with that we can mitigate the issue of our Gold Leo just being a hand trap magnet. Something that the 2 copies of Kaleido Chick I also play in the deck is not, in that this card dumps for cost. You can't really effectively imperm or veiler the Kaleido Chick, nor can you even ash the effect to dump since it sends for cost. And then I have the 1 Yellow Marten, 3 copies of Tiger, 1 Black Sheep, and 1 Silver Hound. I've already discussed plenty why I think 3 Tiger is correct in the Lunalight deck. It is kinda like playing Soul Charge in hat format. It's just a card you wanna draw. Even though the Tiger is searchable in this deck, just having access to 2 comes up quite a lot. Cause if you play just 1 and they just banish it, your entire Lunalight engine is basically gone. These cards aren't very threatening unless you can spam bodies to make rank 4s or even link plays. And without Tiger giving you those names, it's actually pretty difficult to get to Wolf and enough names to banish for Liger. And I'm not playing Wolf in this deck because I think just summoning 1 Liger Dancer is enough. I don't think it makes sense to clutter your extra deck with a bunch of fusions you never really go into. Either you're going to be hand trapped to the point where you can't even make Liger, or they don't hand trap you, or they Molcharmy you and you still decide to go for a Liger, and you make 1 Liger and they just can't out it, ever. So playing all these bricks like 2 copies of Silver Hound, a Tri-Brigade Fractal, the Lunalight Fusion, Lunalight Wolf, Emerald Bird, multiple copies of Yellow Marten, these cards which don't advance your game state at all, as opposed to Tiger, which is just a monster reborn. And obviously when you pair Tiger with Barrage, you get additional bodies, because when this card is destroyed you summon 1 back. So the whole focus of this deck just changes when you don't include 7-8 fusions in your deck. Instead you play the bare minimum so you can actually summon Liger and use the effect. Because when they pass back and they can't out the first Liger, you kill them on the crackback. And naturally, since this version of the deck plays way less bricks than the all-in fusion strategy, you have a much easier time going second. And when they have a way to stop your Liger Dancer, in a D-barrier for example, or a Blackout Laugh which is activated at the opportune time, your Lunalight deck just doesn't do anything at all. For the same reason why the Ryseal variant, which was the pure deck that just summoned Detonator, wasn't really the best way to play Ryseal either. The best Ryseal decks were Mitsurugi Ryseal or Fiendsmith Ryseal, as they were able to attack from different angles and thus didn't lose to cards like Dimensional Barrier. As such, this is why I played the Lunalight deck with a larger emphasis on the XYZ plays, as I believe that gives you a lot of utility when you go second, and way better plays into hand traps, such as Lancia. Then for the Zoodiac names, I have just 2, in 1 Blade and 1 Ram. I think Ram is the best of the Zoodiacs which you don't really want to play. I think Ram is the best of the Zoodiacs which don't really have an effect, but still kinda do, because you can negate cards like Infinite Impermanence. Something like Whiptail, being able to banish a monster, is not really relevant at this point in the game, and especially for this type of deck. There aren't too many targeting spells to where you would want Bunny Blast to negate them, and Ratpier sending you a name doesn't really do anything when you don't play that many names. And I'm playing the 4-Blade, in case I draw 2 Zoodiacs, such as 2 copies of Barrage, or just a way to access this with a Zoo in hand, you can use this effect to discard it and draw another card. As the Zoodiacs here is a supplement to your engine, you're not really trying to play with the Zoodiacs that much. They're just additional bodies to make your rank 4 plays, or maybe some link. And if all goes according to plan, you will pass on a Drident, as an additional form of disruption. And then the Ram under the Drident is the best one. And then to search them out, the 3 copies of Zoodiac Barrage. So this card does a lot for the deck. If you go second, you can use Barrage, or just summon a Zoo, make a Borbo, go into battle phase, attack directly, and then stack a number of Zeus on top, and then make a Zeus to just nuke their entire field. Depending on the setup of your yummy opponent, this could completely stop them in their tracks, as they don't really have a great answer to you just going normal summon Ram, exceed into Borbo, swing, and then stack a Zeus with 4 materials. Thus with 4 materials you play around their Arclight negate. But preferably you use this card as an extender. So basically you start playing with your Lunalights, and Tiger, when it summons back a monster from the scale, the effect is negated. However, when you use the monster effect of Tiger, when it's destroyed, summon back a Luna, it is not negated. As such, if you use Kaleido to dump a Gold Leo to the graveyard, and then you pop the Tiger with Barrage, you can bring back the Gold Leo and still use its effect, which is something that was pretty difficult to do before. If you had to start your play with normal summon Kaleido, you had to go for a bunch of hoops to actually summon the Gold Leo and be able to use its effect. But with this, you have a way to immediately do so, and this particularly comes up when the Gold Leo gets impermed. You can then link this off or exceed it off into Tiger King or Dugaris. And then when you do something like Tiger, bring back Schick, Barrage, pop the Tiger, bring back Leo, and summon a Zoodiac from your deck of course, you can then use the Schick that you summon off of Tiger, dump a Black Sheep for cost, and use Gold Leo to add it back. And from this you just create a bunch of different lines to go for. So that is why Barrage is just a great extender for the Lunalight deck, and just a good way for you to actually play through their hand traps, or act as a pseudo board breaker in that you can also Drident to pop something on their field. If you aren't able to Zeus them or just want to save your battle phase, you can actually go for game with the Liger Dancer. And even if they Fuvo you don't have to go for the Drident. You can just use this as an emergency teleport when they hand trap you on either of your key cards, and you still go for the Liger Dancer board. If their deck just can't out Liger, it doesn't really matter if they have 5, 7, 9 cards in their hand. A lot of the time you just play this deck in a way where you hold your negates or your interruptions for their 1 card to out Liger. Because even if they play normally, if they put up a board that is quite formidable, you still have access to a Regeki from the Liger Dancer, and your push the following turn is actually pretty good, with all your Tigers and various extra deck plays. Then I have 3 copies of Lunalight Perfume, 3 copies of Fire Formation Tenki. There was some consideration of playing less copies of Tenki actually, because you always go for Tiger King. But this deck has so much engine and various extenders, since I'm also playing 3 copies of Perfume and some cards in my non-engine slots, which can also act as engine cards. As such, even if you've drawn this card and can't set another one from Tiger to activate it, you can go for Dugaris to dig 2, and that will hopefully get you to the extender you need. 1 copy of Polymerization, 1 Masquerade, and 1 Serenade Dance. I'm only playing 1 copy of Masquerade. Whilst this card is a starter, I think it's a pretty poor one. It plays super hard into pretty much any form of removal, as well as Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, which is actually mained quite a lot this format, as it is also good against Yummy and Vanquish Soul K9. It also has the issue of being a card you always access in your combo, so if you draw this card to start your plays, similar to Tenki but even more so because this is a card you always access, since you have to do it to get your Liger Dancer out, your combo will inevitably just be worse, because you were gonna search this card anyway. As such, starting with this is not only worse into any hand trap they might have, in that a spell which has to go through Silverhound is obviously weaker to Fuva, it is weaker to Ash, Ogre, any monster or spell negates, and then when your Martin triggers to search and you have to search Serenade Dance, you need a way to get this card into graveyard for it to become an extender, when the Masquerade by itself would just be the extender right then and there. Additionally, with the barrages that I play, and the fact that I'm also on goods, and that's a breaker and a starter card, I think it's fine to slim down on Masquerade, as it is the worst engine card in your deck. If you think that the deck is too inconsistent, you could definitely add more of this into the main deck, and slim down on some of the non-engine. But I think the Lunalight deck, in that it's mostly just engine cards, is already really consistent. So you don't need to make those concessions to make your deck worse when you go second, as you're not really gonna brick a whole lot with this deck to begin with. But that's it for the engine cards. And then for the non-engine, some of which are also engine cards, starting with 3 copies of Mulcharmy Fuvalos. When you go second, the Mulcharmies are perfect non-engine, as they deter your opponent from making their entire field, as long as they can't negate this. And they also draw you into additional cards, so if they draw you into board breakers or more engine, you can naturally just push through what they have, as the board's already gonna be weaker from the Mulcharmy. And then if they give you 2 or 3 draws, you're almost sure to just break apart the field, and usually go for game. 3 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust. Whilst being a conditional starter, as long as they have a monster on the field and have activated a monster effect, this card can grab plenty of your engine cards. It is also just one of the best breakers in the deck when you go second, because you can grab powerful board breakers like Triple Tactics Talent, which is also just a very powerful Yu-Gi-Oh card. And is a great punish to them hand trapping you when you go first and you open the Soul Talents. Then I have 3 copies of Book of Eclipse. There's not a whole lot of Link decks going around right now, so Eclipse can just book their entire field, or at least force out the Arclight Negate. And if you force out the Arclight Negate, then your Thrust and Talents will be live, as long as you activate this card in main phase 1. Additionally, the Book of Eclipse is also a pretty good going first card. When you summon Goldeo and they use Imperm on this, you could then chain Book of Eclipse. Put this face down and it will resolve. This is the case even if they were to chain something like Effect Veiler to your Eclipse, as for some reason whenever a monster goes face down, it doesn't matter whatsoever what type of negations were put on that card. Unlike if you, for example, use the effect of Goldeo, and they do something like Ghost Ogre Chainlink 2 and Chainlink 3 Effect Veiler. Then they would negate it would go to grave, and then it would resolve negated. When cards go face down, they just push through the negation, irregardless if it was negated before the Eclipse resolved or after. To which it would lose its target, which is something you can do with Forbidden Droplet. If you send the card a target with infinite impermanence with Droplet, your card will still resolve. This deck plays a ton of spells, so it's actually pretty easy for you to Droplet even under Arclight. And of course Droplet is a very good card in this deck because you can use it going first or going second, and you can do the aforementioned play where you dodge something like Imperm on your Goldeo. Then I have 3 copies of Foolish Burial of Goods and 1 Blackout Laugh. Goods send Blackout is basically a non-engine, as you get to call whatever they have on the field and they can't use its effect. When you go first and they hand trap you, and you're able to use Thrust to set Blackout, you have a very good pseudo Floodgate in that they can't summon the monster you call if it's something like Snatchy against the Yummy deck. Then you will also have this card in grave, so you can then banish it on your following turn to call something that they have on the field, and just get a double interruption from your Thrust into Blackout. And Goods is also an engine card, in that you can send Serenade Dance to get the emergency teleport type effect, or you can send Perfume and just have it be a Rhoda for your Tiger or any starter. But that is it for the main deck. It is 42 cards. Then for the extra deck, I have 1 copy of Cross Sheep, 1 copy of IP Masquerena, 1 copy of SP Little Knight, 1 copy of Buguska, the Terribly Tired Tapir, 1 copy of Eclipse Twins, 1 Zoodiac Borbo, which allows us to attack directly and go for a Zeus, 1 copy of Zoodiac Shakanine, and 1 copy of Zoodiac Drident. I'm only playing these Zoodiac Exceeds, as I just wanted 3 of them, so I can go Zoodiac, Borbo, Shakanine Drident, and Zeus. As this would be 4 materials, I can then use my Zeus twice, and if they use something like Herald of Arclight or Imperm, I can use the Zeus again. Another consideration was just playing 1 Drident, forgoing the Zeus, forgoing the Borbo and Shakanine, and then you could play 3 other cards in your extra deck. So if you like to summon multiple copies of Liger Dancer, even though it is completely win more, you could still play the Zoodiac variant of this deck by implementing a small XYZ package, just playing 1 copy of Drident, and still utilize Barrage as a good extender, and pass into something that's good into Relancia, for example, or if they were just able to stop you getting to Liger Dancer, you can still end on a disruption in the form of Drident. 1 copy of number 60 Dugareth Timeless, 1 copy of Tiger King. This card is way easier to make in the deck when you play Barrage, as you have additional ways to just summon a body to your field, and the tanking becomes even better when you have more search targets. Additionally, the Tiger King negation effect can actually come up against some matchups. 1 copy of Zeus, something that hasn't been played a lot in recent times. I think that is because this card wasn't that good against Malice or Ryseal. Even against Mitsurugi, they could just battle phase pop your Exceed that is trying to attack and stop you from making Zeus. Against the Ryseal deck, if they had Eclipse Twins under the Detonator, they would just bring it back and you would still have to deal with that. Additionally, they could just cross-negate your Zeus if you only had 2 or 3 materials. And against the Malice deck, they could just march into Whitebinder, banish their entire grave and bring it all back, and thus your board wipe didn't do too much. However, against Vanquish Soul K9, against Yummy or Draco Tail, the Zeus wiping their entire field is very good. 2 copies of Perfume Dancer. I'm playing 2 copies of Perfume Dancer, because you need a 4th fusion to use Liger Dancer's effect. In my previous version of XYZ Lunalight, I used to do a Protoss lock, as that was a very efficient way to beat Rise, Seal, and Malice, or even Mitsu. However, with Vanquish All K9 being a deck, or just K9 in general, the Protoss lock is not as efficient anymore, as they play plenty of different attributes. That also goes against the Draco Tail deck. Even though you could call one of the attributes that summons the best monster they have, you can't lock them out completely. So against Yumi, for example, it's still very efficient to just call Light, because they lose the game. But against these multi-attribute decks, you can't really do that in the same fashion. As such, I'm not gonna banish a fusion in my combo and then be able to put it back with Banshee. So I do actually need 4 fusion to actually be able to use Liger Dancer's effect. If the format changes a bit, in such a way where Banshee into Protoss becomes more viable, I could definitely see myself playing the Banshee in this deck. And then the only concern would be Purulia, as the Purulia is the only real punish to you going flag, put back the banished fusion, and then have the fusion to send with Liger, as that would give them 2 additional draws from Purulia in flag and Protoss. Otherwise you could just play 4 fusions, and then you can summon this, send this, summon this, and still send a perfume with the Liger. But that's the extra deck. And for the side deck, I have 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. Well, they didn't hit this, so I'm still going to play it. There are some matchups where you can just completely stop their turn. And especially in a deck like this, where you're not playing 20 hand traps, it's pretty nice to have a hand trap, similar to a Mulcharmy, to where if you just draw one of them and you use it, it just does a whole lot. 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. I don't side discarding going second against something like the combo decks, because 1 Ash is not going to do enough. But Ash is pretty nice when you go first, because you can stop their Mulcharmies, and you can use this card against some of their board breakers. For example, if they go goods, to send Blackout to shut off your Liger Dancer, you can negate the goods with Ash, and then you can just Liger them whenever they try to present an out. Additionally, there's always going to be some rogue decks, which you can side Ash into, to where it's really good, even if they don't Mulcharmy you. 3 copies of Mulcharmy Meows, 3 copies of Fantastical Dragon Phantasme, 1 Call by the Grave, 1 Duster, and 1 D-Barrier. These 2 are for Frost, so siding 1 of Spell and Traps, which you can grab off of Frost, can be really good. And there isn't really another normal Spell or Trap which you really need to play. This card covers a lot of back row decks when you go second by just wiping away their entire back row. And D-Barrier covers a lot of the combo decks when you go first, or even mid-range. A lot of the time in this deck, if your opponent just passes back to you, they just lose. And I didn't feel the need to play something against the Vanquish Soul K9 deck. While that deck is still very playable, I think a lot of people would just opt not to play it. And even against that deck, Blackout Laugh is usually good enough, as a lot of their disruption will be on field, so you can use this card when you set it with Frost, call something that they're gonna summon in their turn, and they obviously can't summon it, and in your turn you can banish this to stop any of their on-field interruptions. So even if you can't establish a Liger, or they miraculously out it, like a Kaiju or something, you can usually push for the rest of their board, in that their board will be weakened by you using Blackout, and then you can just shut off the one interruption which you feel actually threatens you the most. But that's it for the deck profile. Do you guys think there is a better deck to play the Zoodiac engine in? Or is Lunalight the best we got? Or do you think pure Zoodiac is actually underestimated? Let me know in the comments. But until we see each other again, thank you for watching, and have a good rest of your day. If you enjoy my content, make sure to also subscribe to my second channel, linked in the description box down below. There I'll be posting more personalized and exclusive content.